Global happenings today. We communicate, we analyze global news. Stay tuned.
Hello beautiful people, welcome back to Global Happenings Today YouTube channel. We have two very interesting news to render. Today is indeed a special day. Happy new month to all of us. We wish greater days ahead for all of us. Now let's quickly move down to the news. Right now as we speak, the person of Atiku is already in court. Moment we're going to find out what he's doing there as of today, of course. And of course by 2, Peter Obi will be in court live over his own case. Meanwhile, many Nigerians did not get to hear the responses and this brief summary of the fourth respondent, that's APC, and the reply to the petitioner, that's Labour Party's final address. So we're going to give you full details on that, of course. And then what is going on in court. Before we go to your newspaper, kindly subscribe to our channel by clicking on the red subscribe button beside it. If you see a bell notification icon, please go ahead, click on it to get notified as soon as you update our channel on YouTube. Let's quickly start with Atiku. Atiku is in court. 2 p.m. Peter Obi will be in court. The presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party (PDP), Alhaji Abubakar Atiku, was at the presidential election petition called as PEPC as at today, as parties were set to adopt their final written addresses. Report has it that the adoption of the final addresses is the precursor to fixing a date for judgment in the petition of Atiku and the PDP challenging the outcome of the February 25th presidential election. And of course, the Justice Haruna Tsunami-led 5-member panel of the court had on the last adjourned date directed parties to prepare their final briefs of argument and appear before it to adopt. The court, in a notice to the parties, invited them to adopt their written address with respect to the petition filed against President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Vice President Kashim Shettima, praying the court to nullify their election. Of course, let's quickly round down to what the brief summary of the fourth respondents, that's APC's reply to the petitioners, Peter Obi and Labour Party's final address. APC started by mentioning that a cursory analysis reviewed an attempt by Labour Party to bring in additional evidence while also playing to the gallery of the millions of Nigerians. Now they also mentioned, that's APC now, they also mentioned that the reliance of Oyetola versus Adeleke was misleading. They further opined that the most important thing the court should consider is if they even made a case for themselves. They further argued that it is the law, contrary to the position of Labour Party, that a party who did not call any witness but elicited evidence in support of his case from the adversary during the cross-examination can rely on such evidence. He did not say, see a case study of Andrew versus INEC. Now, they also further mentioned that Labour Party did not address the US Embassy letter dated 4th February 2003. And the failure of Labour Party to lead evidence or prove corrupt practices, inapplicability of margin lead principle to the fact that the petition has constituted and relevancy and applicability of the FHC judgment of Labour Party versus INEC. In specific response to Labour Party submissions, they mentioned as regards Section 137 that conviction and sentencing must have taken place, implying that fine is not enough regarding the forfeiture. As regards the alleged disqualification of Shettima, they argued that, first of all, the issue of nomination is pre-election matter, which cannot be decided by the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, and that PDP versus INEC has settled that same matter. On the issue of compliance, they argued that INEC complied with the Electoral Act and guidelines. They also mentioned that the major issue is whether INEC has an obligation to upload the election result of a polling unit on the spot during election. They mentioned that the Supreme Court clearly answered it in the negative in Oyetola's case. The same Oyetola's case that they say is misleading. Let's continue. They also further mentioned that the witness who testified as regards to the health status of the AWS is a member of Labour Party and therefore a person of interest whose evidence in law cannot be relied on. On the issue of 2/3 of the votes in the FCT, APC argued that Abuja cannot be placed on a higher pedestal than other states. They also further mentioned that the cases cited by Labour Party, which is Okoyede versus FCDA. Cited by Labour Party, said Okoyede versus FCDA. I take that again. Okoyede versus FCDA and Panya versus President. FRN and ORS supported assertion that FCT should be treated as a state. They also submitted that there is no provision of the law on or any case that mandates that a candidate should score 1/4 of the total vote cast in FCT. Haba. Now, conclusively, they submitted in a whole to the effect that there is no evidence before the court showing that petitioners, which is Labour Party and Peter Obi, won the election under reference. Now, let me just say this in summary. What they are saying in effect is that what Peter Obi and Labour Party presented as their petition or their written petition, or when they started filing the whole process, that they were unable to prove it. Win margin, and instead they're looking for extra prayers here and there to add up, that based on what they have tendered in court and what they are writing as their final written address is totally different from what they are praying for from their petition at the beginning, and hence they said it lacks credibility, it holds no water, it holds no evidence, and it should be expunged. That is what APC, in summary, the APC-led legal team is rewriting in their final written address, of which they're going to be adopting today. Of course, the person of Atiku Abubakar is already in court on that same matter. So hopefully by the time they are done with the adoption, of course, there will always be a case of, okay, this is not acceptable, because eventually all their final written addresses, the counter, the for, and the rest, they will address it all today. Then after which, based on their final written addresses and adoption of all their final written addresses, they will now go into it. We are hopeful and prayerful that we don't go on technical grounds. If the evidence is on ground, because they said, according to APC, the fact that they did not present a witness does not mean that they don't have a legal ground or they don't have adequate evidence. It clearly means, according to them, according to them, and paraphrasing what they said, that they only used the witnesses, brought the cross-examination of the witnesses brought in by Labour Party, Labour Party and Peter Obi to use to portray their own point that Peter Obi hold no water, or his evidence is to claim back a mandate does not hold water. Like all of this, don't forget very quickly that these judges we're talking about, they're also Nigerians. They live in Nigeria. Even if they don't live in Nigeria, that's what we call posterity. And their lineage is actually from Nigeria. So whatever judgment they're making, we are honestly hoping and praying that we don't go on technical grounds. We go on facts, figures, and evidence is being brought before them. But like Prime Minister Ayodele said in one of our previous posts, God is watching. Everybody's watching. The world is watching. Nigerians are watching. Posterity will be there to remind us of this day, on the day of that final verdict, to determine the law. Don't forget that as we speak, most African countries have decided to go through the military era. The likes of Mali is now being ruled militarily. The likes of Niger now is being ruled militarily, and a whole lot. And honestly, in all honesty, I do not want Nigeria to be ruled by military. We've been there before. Except if you are the Indomie generation. If you have been in the dispensation of the military era, you would agree with me that the freedom you enjoy in democracy is never the same with military era. So those people who are jumping and making noise up and down that you want military, you had better be coming down. Military cannot have the power to defend and protect the territory and still have the power to govern the country. It's not been so. Those who lived in the military era in Nigeria will tell you what it means. That's going to wrap it up. Let's put in our comment section what's the take. Keep a date with us as Peter